Have you ever felt your favorite Pokemon was done dirty by the developers? Like it was put in the game just to pad out the Pokédex and then never given the tools it needs to succeed in battle? Well, you're not alone. Tons of Pokemon have either fallen off in recent years or were never good to begin with. These Pokemon are left with nothing and are considered unviable for competitive play. That's where I come in. I'm taking your favorite low-tier Pokemon and giving them realistic buffs to help them find success in competitive Pokemon battles. This is the Pokemon Pit Stop. For those who haven't swung by the Pit Stop before, the rules are simple. We're fixing unviable Pokemon by giving them access to tools they're currently lacking. We won't be adding any new moves, abilities, or evolutions. Increasing a Pokemon's stats is on the table, but following Game Freak's example, we won't buff a Pokemon's base stats by more than 40 points, including any previous buffs Game Freak has already made. And of course, these changes have to be thematically appropriate for the Pokemon in question, so no Flash Fire Leavanny or Fusion Bolt Beartic or any nonsense like that. To get things started, let's look at one of the simpler fixes I've got lined up for today. Rapidash is a Mustang, both the animal and the classic Ford model. This thing is sleek, it's fast, it's cool, it's also completely outclassed by more practical options. Sure, this thing is the fastest out of all of them, and you might even think it looks the best, but when your money's on the line, you'll pick reliability over style. And don't even get me started on the new models, genuinely why do these exist? Tying them to the old models only makes them more disappointing, they really should have been their own thing. Anyways, back to classic Rapidash. Its stats look like they should lend it to a Glass Cannon playstyle, but it just doesn't work. It takes way too much damage from entry hazards and its best move, Flare Blitz, to consistently put in the damage it needs. And while it does have reliable recovery in Morning Sun, its poor bulk doesn't give it a chance to heal up after it gets started. But what if it didn't need to heal up? What if it could avoid all that indirect damage with Magic Guard? For those unaware, Magic Guard protects the user from all damage which does not directly come from an attack. They're immune to poison damage, entry hazards, and most relevant to Rapidash, the recoil from their own attacks. Pokemon fans have speculated about a physically leaning Magic Guard user for a while, though normally this is for things like Galarian Zapdos, which don't fit the ability thematically. But I would argue that there is little more magical than a unicorn, which makes Magic Guard perfect for Rapidash. This allows Rapidash to use Flare Blitz without damaging itself. This also means it no longer has to carry the heavy-duty boots item to shield itself from entry hazard damage, allowing it to carry a more aggressive item like Life Orb. Life Orb normally boosts the user's attacks by 30% at the cost of 10% of the holder's HP, but of course, Magic Guard shields the user from that recoil as well. So Rapidash just got a lot stronger and more durable with just this new ability. There are a few other things that make a fire type like Rapidash especially good at taking advantage of Magic Guard. The most prominent is its immunity to burns. While Magic Guard shields the user from burn damage, it does not prevent the burn from having your Pokemon's attack. So if, say, a physically attacking water type had Magic Guard, it could get shut down by a burn neutering its attack stat. But since fire types can't be burned, Rapidash doesn't have to worry about that. It also appreciates being able to use one of its favorite coverage moves, Wild Charge, without recoil as well. On top of that, fire is a solid defensive typing, with 6 different resistances, and while normally that defense is hindered by the type's weakness to stealth rocks, Rapidash would be immune to them, and thus could find more entry points throughout a battle. Rapidash would still suffer from its low stats. That 105 speed is less and less impressive as the gens go on, not to mention its borderline average attack of 100. But Magic Guard would breathe new life into this Pokemon, and finally let it out of the shadows of its fellow Gen 1 fire types. Ampharos is definitely a fan favorite. It's one of the few electric types which forgoes the whole glass cannon vibe the other electric types have and aims to take hits before dishing them back. This works well in the story mode, where most opponents aren't hitting too hard to begin with, but falls apart in the hyper-optimized world of competitive battles. Ampharos' bulk is alright. I mean, frailer Pokemon have had some success as tanks, but unfortunately, Ampharos doesn't really use that bulk for anything. Thunder Wave is nice, but literally every other electric type has that covered. Reflect and Light Screen used to be solid, but have largely been outclassed by Aurora Veil, especially now that Hail has been replaced with Snow, which is easier to build teams around. It doesn't have any reliable recovery, so it can only take a few attacks before that bulk goes to waste. And, most damning of all, it's a bulky Pokemon weak to one of the most common attacks in the game, Earthquake. The fact that basically any physical attacker worth their salt can threaten Ampharos with a powerful ground-type attack really dampens its ability to tank hits. There's a reason Snorlax stocks plummeted around the time Close Combat was added. First things first, let's give Ampy some actual utility. Encore, Follow Me, and Heal Bell would give Ampharos something to do when it switches in, and Milk Drink would be a pretty on-brand healing move for it. I think it'd be really funny to give it Defog as well. While the move is supposed to be blowing fog and other hazards away with a big gust of wind, something which isn't quite in Ampharos' wheelhouse, it just makes sense to give the anti-fog move to the Lighthouse Pokemon. Of course, you can't talk about giving Ampharos new moves without bringing up Tail Glow. It's another obvious inclusion, allowing the user to boost its special attack by 3 stages in one turn and drastically increase its damage output. Giving this to Ampharos could make it a potent wall breaker, able to come in on other defensive Pokemon and threaten them with powerful boosted attacks. Now, there have been a fair share of detractors to the Tail Glow Ampharos campaign, who say it doesn't make sense for Ampharos to get Tail Glow, since its original Japanese name translates to Firefly Glow, and Ampharos is not a Firefly. This, frankly, is a load of shit. Ignoring the fact that only one of Tail Glow's 3 users is even remotely a Firefly, there's another powerful Bug-type boosting move with a similar name change, Quiver Dance, whose Japanese name literally translates to Butterfly Dance. You never hear anyone say Oricorio, Blossom, or Lilligant shouldn't have access to this move, despite being exactly 0% Butterfly, and so I'm giving Tail Glow to Ampharos. And then, in the script, it looks like Parker just wrote, clock it. I think I've clocked it. I think I clocked the T, as they say. Let me know in the comments if I'm using that right. There's one last change I had in mind for Ampharos, though frankly it might be a bit too strong. Ampharos doesn't really have a good ability at the moment, but I think there's a solid argument that it could get Regenerator. Regenerator heals the user every time it switches out of battle, restoring 1/3 of their total HP. This is a powerful ability, allowing Pokemon like Slowbro and Amoonguss to practically negate the hits they come in to take. And I think it makes sense for Ampharos to get it. It generates electricity, which fits the name of Regenerator, and sheep are heavily associated with cloning, literally regenerating existing cells. This isn't an airtight argument, of course, but frankly it'd make about as much sense as Mienshao or Tornadus getting the ability. The potential problem with giving Ampharos Regenerator is its access to a common electric-type move, Volt Switch. Volt Switch damages the target, then switches the user out. I'm sure you can see how this could be powerful. Ampharos can take a hit, do a solid chunk of damage with Volt Switch, send in its teammates safely, then heal off most if not all the damage it just took. I don't think this would be overpowered necessarily. Any ground type can switch in to block Volt Switch, and Ampharos doesn't have anything to threaten them with. But it could still be unfun to play against, like how Teleport made Slowbro and Slowking unbearable in Gen 8. If that would be the case, then maybe Ampharos could trade out its hidden ability for Mold Breaker, and Mega Ampharos could get Regenerator instead, to add an opportunity cost to this strategy. Speaking of underwhelming electric types, we have our first viewer requested Pokemon. This primarily comes from one Mr. Zygarde6431, but the Pokemon in question were also requested by GoGothitaLol and Ultimate Pleb. Mr. Zygarde thinks Luxray and Electivire should have access to Alolan Golem signature ability, Galvanize, which turns normal type moves into electric type moves and gives them a bit of a power boost. This idea has been kicking around quite a bit lately, and fellow PokeTuber Xbell outlined how this would buff these Pokemon's power and utility, but I'll quickly summarize. All of the good electric-type physical attacks are reserved for specific Pokemon, so if you're a physically oriented electric type without this special treatment, you're out of luck. However, these Pokemon all get access to powerful physical normal-type moves, so Galvanize would grant them the damage they currently lack. I think this is a solid fix, and I'd also extend this change to Zebstrika and Electros. Of course, I'd prefer if these Pokemon could just have a solid electric attack so they can use other abilities, but I will say I'm opposed to buffing Wild Charge like many fans have suggested. At first, Wild Charge seems like a heavily nerfed version of similar recoil moves like Wood Hammer, Flare Blitz, and Wave Crash. However, the distribution for these moves is incredibly strict, basically limited to Pokemon of the move's type, plus a few thematically appropriate exceptions. Meanwhile, tons of Pokemon get Wild Charge, despite having no ties to electricity, like Rayquaza, Granbull, Go-Goat, and tons of fire types. While we could make Wild Charge the same as these other moves and just remove it from these Pokemon's movesets, I feel like Wild Charge is really balanced around being a coverage move right now, and it'd be weird to strip that away. I'd much rather Game Freak just add a new physical electric type attack instead, maybe a stat lowering move like Superpower to make it distinct from Wild Charge and Volt Tackle. Or maybe they could make Supercell Slam not total garbage? No? Worth a shot. It's always a shame when you stop seeing the cars you grew up with. You don't really think about it much, but you get so familiar seeing the models out on the road that it's honestly jarring when they get replaced by the new ones. Like, that is not the Subaru Outback. What the fuck is that supposed to be?
That's not my baby!
Like cars, competitive Pokemon archetypes have come and gone over the years. What once were dominant strategies that shaped the metagame around them have fallen to the wayside, and the Pokemon designed to play into those strategies are left with nothing. And I'd argue there is no greater example of this than the Psychic-type Sweeper. What was at worst the second best type in the game in Generation 1 has not fared the test of time. Psychic remained solid up to Generation 5, where teams would load up on multiple Psychic types to overwhelm the opponent's counters to them. But that largely worked because the Pokemon on these teams were super powerful in their own right, not because Psychic as a type was so good. Psychic typing wasn't a burden per se, but it wasn't exactly a selling point anymore. When Gen 6 came along though, Psychic got obliterated. Dark types got much better, thanks to Steel no longer resisting them and the buffs to the move Knockoff, which went from practically a status move to the single best physical attack in the game. Meanwhile, the new Fairy type not only countered these Dark types, but also threatened the fighting types which Psychic had historically taken on. Fairy Pokemon had officially taken Psychic's niche away, and as a whole, the type became much less desirable. While some Psychic types have held on to relevance, now it's usually in spite of their Psychic typing. Alakazam's combination of high speed, special attack, and the ability Magic Guard would be stellar even if it was a bug type, let alone a type with some actual firepower. Other formerly great Psychic types have been relegated to the lower tiers, like Starmie and Celebi. One only needs to look at Mewtwo, once synonymous with the strongest Pokemon, and how it's fallen from grace to see just how dire things are for Psychic types. And naturally, a Psychic type who was never great even when the type was useful is really going through it right now. Which leads us to Grumpig. Grumpig has always been a pretty mid Pokemon. It's yet another victim of the SPDEF dump stat, where instead of giving it decent stats all around, they just poured a ton into special defense and gave it nothing to take advantage of that. It's a bulky-ish special tank, but Psychic has barely any resistances, limiting Grumpig's ability to take on powerful special attackers. Thick Fat shores this up a bit, but most of the time you'd rather run a Water Psychic or Fire Psychic type and get the same resistances, plus more. It had some usage as a Cleric with Heal Bell in the early Gen low tiers, but after Gen 6 it has basically nothing to do. It's certainly no special sweeper. Even if Psychic types were still good at that, Grumpig would be outclassed by a ton of Pokemon. It's not particularly fast or strong, so it's not really offering anything that any other Psychic type couldn't do better. Well, there is one thing. Grumpig has some meat on its bones. This is not at all reflected in its stats, but it does give it access to an interesting move, Body Press. Body Press is a physical fighting type attack, but instead of basing its damage off of the user's attack stat like usual, it goes off of their defense stat. This is a super common move on Tankymons like Corviknight and Archaludon. Even though these Pokemon aren't fighting type, they love having an attack which doesn't require them to invest in an attacking stat. Meanwhile, Psychic types would love reliable fighting type coverage to hit the Dark and Steel types which resist their stab moves. Historically, they've been stuck using Focus Blast, which is extremely powerful but notoriously unreliable. And of course, they aren't able to pose a threat with physical attacks like Brick Break since they have such low attack stats. Body Press not only gives Grumpig reliable fighting type damage, but it gives it a way to threaten special walls like Blissey and Regice, which don't take physical hits so well. This is, theoretically, really powerful, but if Grumpig has this already, why is it still so bad? Well, among other things, its Body Press isn't that threatening with a base defense of 65. So let's start there. We'll be bumping Grumpig's defense to a more acceptable base 80. This should allow it to deal decent damage with Body Press, though it's still not a lot. Even with this stat buff, its base stat total is still under 500. While some Pokemon with stats this low have seen competitive success, they typically have an amazing ability to compensate. Let's give Grumpig a similarly great ability and replace Gluttony with Simple. Simple doubles the effects of any stat raises or decreases on the user. For example, if a Bibarel with this ability used the move Curse, it would raise its attack and defense by 2 stages instead of 1, but it would also lower its speed by 2 stages instead of 1. This ability is restricted to the Bibarel and Swoobat lines, plus Numel, as its effects could quickly become overwhelming on a more powerful Pokemon. Like, just imagine a Haxorus or something with this ability, using Dragon Dance and essentially getting a Swords Dance boost and an Agility boost at the same time. That would be... well, it wouldn't be balanced is all I'll say. I think Grumpig would be manageable. Its stats are still incredibly low, and it wouldn't be too hard to take it on even after a Calm Mind boost, but this would let it act as a wall breaker against slower, more passive Pokemon. I think it'd also be fun to give it access to Bulk Up, allowing it to boost its Body Press damage to break through bulky, psychic-resistant Pokemon. This, plus Trailblaze to boost its speed, would give Grumpig a bunch of options to set up on the opponent's more passive Pokemon and pose a major threat, despite its low base stats. With all this in mind, I will be removing Nasty Plot from Grumpig's Learn set. Partially because that might be a bit too strong, but mostly so that Swoobat can keep some advantage over this new and improved Grumpig. We don't want to steal its whole shtick, it's had it bad enough as it is. Speaking of two-stage purple Pokemon from Generation 3, it's time for our next viewer request, Swalot. Unchained Pandoran has given us some ideas to buff their favorite blobby boy. It's the big three: stat buff, move buff, new ability. I agree with the first two. Buffs to its HP and defenses plays into Swalot's current role as either a tank or a setup attacker, and frankly, I thought this thing had recover already. I also like the idea of it getting Follow Me. As for Swalot's ability, I don't mind replacing Gluttony with Corrosion, but I think we can play into its hit-taking playstyle better by replacing one of its abilities with Earth Eater. Now, Swalot is not only immune to one of its only weaknesses, but it can switch into Ground-type moves for a bit of extra healing. Traditionally, this build of a bulky poison type with a ground immunity is Weezing's shtick, but I think Swalot provides a fun alternative without overshadowing it. Weezing can spread burns, use fire and electric coverage moves, and provide momentum with self-destruct moves like Explosion and Memento, while Swalot can spread paralysis, use ice coverage moves, and stick around longer with more reliable healing. Plus, Weezing has its neutralizing gas sets too, so it's not a huge shame if Swalot infringes a little on this specific niche. Next is not a single Pokemon, but rather an ability shared by multiple Pokemon, Iron Fist. Iron Fist is a pretty straightforward ability, boosting the damage of any punching attack by 20%. The main issue with this ability is that it is entirely outclassed by Tough Claws, another ability which boosts all contact moves by 30%. Given that all punch moves make contact with their target, every user of Iron Fist would be better off if they had Tough Claws instead, and are stuck with the former for purely thematic reasons. The extra insulting part is there are two similar abilities, Strong Jaw and Sharpness, which boost their respective moves by 50%. If these abilities can get such a large boost, why can't Iron Fist? Why don't we buff Iron Fist to be a 50% boost as well? While this would be a huge buff, most of Iron Fist users could use a boost like this. Hitmonchan, Crabominable, Pangoro, none of these Pokemon have been particularly powerful in any generation. Infernape started off strong in its debut generation of Gen 4, but even in modern Gen 4 competitive, it's considered a bit underwhelming, which left it little hope for future generations. Now, all these Pokemon can fire off Drain Punch, as well as one or more of the elemental punches at a base power of 112.5. This is nearly as strong as moves like Close Combat and Flare Blitz, but without their crippling downsides. Infernape especially appreciates these new tools, since frailty has always been its downside, which wasn't helped by constantly lowering its defenses further with Close Combat or losing health with every Flare Blitz. But while these moves are now incredibly strong, they still aren't reaching the ludicrous heights of Sharpness-boosted Sacred Sword and Leaf Blade, and plenty of other slicing moves have comparable strength like Night Slash, Aqua Cutter, and Psycho Cut. Given that Sharpness hasn't made any of its users ban-worthy, I'm confident that most of the Iron Fist users would be greatly improved by the newly buffed Iron Fist, but not too overwhelming. Well, all of them, except for two. The first hiccup in this strategy is Conkeldurr. It's a lot beefier than your average Iron Fist user. Solid attack and bulk, and while it's slow, it can use the increased priority of Mach Punch to pick off faster opponents. Currently, it typically runs sets with the ability Guts, which boosts its attacks when Conkeldurr is affected with a status condition. Specifically, it boosts them by 50%, the same as the buffed Iron Fist. While Iron Fist would only be boosting punching attacks, plenty of Conkeldurr sets already run mostly punching moves, namely Drain Punch and Mach Punch, and would gladly sacrifice the boosted damage to Knockoff in exchange for not taking burn damage every turn, plus freeing up its item slot now that it doesn't have to run the burn orb anymore. This would make its Guts sets obsolete, and could potentially make Conkeldurr too powerful even for overused. Even if it would be manageable, I frankly don't want to give this piece of shit anything. He's so ugly, and he stole Mach Punch from my boy Machamp, who deserves it way more. So I'll be removing Iron Fist from Conkeldurr and replacing it with Scrappy. It wasn't running Iron Fist anyway, and Scrappy at least does something different from the other two abilities it has. Conkeldurr, frankly, should consider itself lucky I didn't give it something stupid like Wimp Out or Runaway. While Conkeldurr can have Iron Fist taken away, it's not so simple with Melmetal. Iron Fist is its only possible ability, and honestly, if this thing doesn't get Iron Fist, I don't know what would. However, this new and improved Iron Fist would make Melmetal incredibly busted, and it's all thanks to one single move, Double Iron Bash, or DIB. DIB is Melmetal's signature move, a 60 power steel-type punching move which hits the opponent twice. This means it effectively has a base power of 120, which was boosted to 144 by the old Iron Fist. The new Iron Fist would launch DIB to 90 power per hit, for a total of 180 damage. This is on par with V-Create, except it doesn't lower any of Melmetal's stats and has over a 50% chance to flinch the target. Still, it's not too hard to fix this. Simply lowering the power of Dib to 50 per hit instead of 60 lowers the total power from 120 to 100, which is then boosted to 150 by Iron Fist, not much more than the old Iron Fist Dib combo. And while Melmetal benefits from the boosted Ice Punch and Thunder Punch, it lacks any punching moves which can threaten Steel types, other than the unreliable Dynamic Punch, and it's still neutered by Burns, so the counterplay to it should be largely the same as it was in Generation 8. With these changes, I feel that Iron Fist with a 50% boost would be totally reasonable. And before we move on, I'd also like to give this new Iron Fist to Poliwrath and Electivire, replacing Damp and Vital Spirit respectively. Both of these Pokemon are pretty underwhelming and would make great use of the increased power Iron Fist provides. Speaking of a third really good segue, today's final request comes from Shady Mahi, who wishes Spiritomb lived up to its lore. Spiritomb seems powerful on paper, having high defenses and a typing which previously had 0 weaknesses, and now only a single weakness to fairy types. But not only does its low HP stat make those high defenses less effective, it also suffers from having very few resistances. Its immunities to normal, fighting, and psychic are good, but Spiritomb's bulk doesn't affect its matchups into these types. It's taking exactly as much damage as Sableye would, despite Sableye's much worse stats. And against every other type, save for poison, Spiritomb's supposedly high defenses are undercut by not being able to resist any attacks. Other defensive Pokemon either take hits thanks to their resistances or their ridiculous bulk, but Spiritomb doesn't have either, and its low speed and mid-attacking stats make it ill-fitted for any other role. For a collection of 108 evil souls trapped in an ancient relic, Spiritomb is pretty tame. So, let's make this thing diabolical. Another commenter, Moffin668, suggested giving it Yveltal's signature ability, Dark Aura, to boost Spiritomb's damage output. Dark Aura increases the power of all Dark-type moves by roughly 33% while the user is on the field. While this would be an incredibly cool and thematic buff for it, I think Spiritomb wouldn't appreciate this ability buffing the damage of Dark moves used against it, most notably making Knockoff even more threatening than it was already. But there is a similar ability which wouldn't have this downside and still fits Spiritomb thematically. The ability Analytic boosts a Pokemon's attacks by 30% if they move after their opponent. Notably, this includes when the opponent's Pokemon switches out, meaning an Analytic user can punish a Pokemon switching in to counter them with a powerful attack. Spiritomb would be an especially good user of the ability, being bulky and slow, and I feel it fits thematically. It's often described as mischievous and thinking wicked thoughts, and this ability plays into this characterization as a conniving schemer. Another interesting quirk about this ability is that it doesn't boost the user's attack stat, but the power of the move they use. So Spiritomb can use the move Foul Play, which bases its damage off of the target's attack rather than the user's, and still take advantage of the Analytic boost, even if it's fully invested in its defenses. Alright, with this change, it's now a lot scarier to switch out against Spiritomb. Now, we're going to force the opponent to switch out against it. We'll give Spiritomb the trapping move Infestation, which it had previously but lost after Generation 7. We're also going to give it the move Perish Song, which puts the user and the target on a 3-turn timer. If either of them are still on the field by the end of the 3rd turn, they instantly faint. This combo allows Spiritomb to trap a Pokemon which can't threaten it, use Perish Song, then switch out right before the counter ends so the opponent dies and Spiritomb lives. Normally, the opponent would simply switch to a more threatening Pokemon as Spiritomb uses Infestation, but Spiritomb can predict this and go for Foul Play instead. Now, it gets a big hit off on the opponent's Pokemon and can switch out to try again later. This creates a 50-50 for your opponent. Do you predict Spiritomb will try to trap your Pokemon and switch out? Or will it try to predict your switch and you should stay in? Guessing wrong will lead to your Pokemon taking a big hit at best and dying to Perish Song at worst. This strategy could be scary if you weren't prepared for it, but luckily there are a ton of things which match up well against it and are already common in competitive play. Taunt shuts down Perish Song, switch moves like U-Turn and Parting Shot ignore trapping effects, and Fairy types don't care about Foul Play or getting trapped with Spiritomb. But it's not like every Pokemon on your opponent's team will check these boxes, meaning you'll just need to work to eliminate those threats before letting Spiritomb do its thing. On top of all that, we'll give Spiritomb some useful coverage in Body Press, Gunk Shot, and Strength Sap. The Perish Trap moveset only has room for one extra move, so while these can help counter its biggest threats, it won't be able to answer all of them. Not without giving up its biggest form of pressure anyway. And I don't know if this is overkill at this point, but bumping its HP from 50 to 70 would make the strategy more consistent. And if all of this doesn't make Spiritomb good, I don't know what to tell you, man. Maybe next time make sure one of those 108 souls you have trapped in there is a King Gambit or something. You've got too many untiered souls, Spiritomb. There's nothing I can do about that. That's all the changes I had for today. Thank you for watching this far. I started this video almost immediately after the previous one went up, thinking I could get it done in about a month. Well, here we are nearly 3 months later, and I'm just barely getting this thing out. Life threw a couple curveballs my way these past few months, and it was hard to make time for editing. I'm back on track now, and I'm hopeful the next video won't take so long. It's been ages since my last proper video essay, and I'm excited to start working on one, now that this is finally out there. As always, a big shout out to Parker Hall for her help with the script. Not that she needs it, her channel now has 3 times the following mine does, but credit where it's due. She's currently hosting a poetry contest to celebrate reaching 10,000 subscribers, and if that sounds interesting, I highly encourage you enter. I promise she won't be nearly as mean as she was to the Doki Doki girls. That should be everything. I'll see you guys in the next video.